Hello and welcome to week 1 of SHS112. This is Child and Family Welfare, summer quarter 2026. I will just remind everyone that this is a slightly shorter class than you might be used to if you have taken classes in the fall, winter, or spring. We'll be wrapping things up in just under 8 weeks, but you can expect a similar cadence of work and assignments to other longer classes that you might have taken here at Edmonds. My name is Liz Ball. I will be your instructor for this quarter. I have an About Me page in the Start Here module, but just for some very brief background, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I currently work in a children's hospital, but I do have a background working in child welfare right at the beginning of my career. I feel really strongly that this is a system that it's important to know about, regardless of what kind of human services work you might be going into, if that is in fact your end goal. Every single person who works in human services is going to interact with this system, so I think it's really important that we all know at least the basics of what the system's goals are, how it operates, and what it means for all of us to interact with it. I'll come back to that a little bit later in this lecture, but I do want to start out with just a couple housekeeping things in terms of this class in general, in terms of these lectures. As a reminder, this is a short class, so I really am going to kind of throw a lot at you over a shorter period of time. I've done my best to not load down this class with lots of busy work, but you are going to see multiple larger assignments as well as almost weekly smaller assignments throughout the quarter. So just try to be mindful. I know not all of the modules are up yet, which I am rapidly working to address, but you should be able to see the larger structure of the class in the syllabus. And the special assignments module should be up to date when this class is going live, so you can at least take a look at that to try to get at least your brain thinking ahead to those larger assignments. In terms of these lectures, I do want to do a little bit of expectation setting there as well. I will typically include a 10 to 15 minute lecture in each module of my classes, and the goal of this is kind of threefold. I've been working in human services for over a decade, and I do have my own personal opinions, my own anecdotes, and my own experiences to share that do add value to the kind of book learning that we'll be doing in this course. So that's one reason that I record these and that I expect folks to watch them. And then the other reasons are to put the information that we're learning into a broader context. And so sometimes we're learning about a bunch of discrete concepts that maybe don't seem to go together, or it's a little harder to tie together. And one of the other goals of these lectures is to sort of synthesize all of that information and pull it together so that we're not just learning these seemingly random buckets of information, but we're seeing really how they all come together. And I think sometimes it's just easier to have someone else draw those lines for you so that you're not just trying to put pieces together on your own. And then the third reason is really just to clarify information that I think might be confusing. Again, I've been doing this for a long time, so a lot of the information that we're discussing seems maybe common knowledge to me or common sense to me. But the more I teach and the more I interact with all of you, I remember that this is not everyone's every day, and that some of these concepts are confusing and complicated and counterintuitive. And so having the ability to come on here and clarify some of those things, I hope, is something that feels very valuable. I will let you know that it is my expectation that you are watching these lectures. If you don't like the sound of my voice or you don't like listening to people, I will always include captions. You're more than welcome to mute me and just read the captions. The information will ultimately be the same, but I do expect that you're absorbing the information from the lectures either in audio format or reading. This is particularly important this quarter, as there will occasionally be your smaller interactive assignments embedded in the lecture. And the reason I'm doing that is linked to the next kind of housekeeping topic that I will bring up, which is AI. I understand that people have a lot of uses for AI and a lot of ways that they maybe use it to support their learning. I am personally not interested in what AI has to say about this material. I'm interested in what you have to say about this material. One of the reasons that you will not see very many of the more standard discussion board format assignments in this course is because I have noticed historically with certain kinds of discussion boards, I see the same response over and over and over and over. And, it might not be verbatim the same, but it will make the same 3 points with roughly the same explanation. And it strongly suggests to me that people are just putting the question into AI and maybe paraphrasing the answer. And again, I'm really just not interested in that. I want to hear what you have to say and what you think, because at the end of the day, if you are taking this class because you want to go into human services work, you are going to need to be able to form these verbal opinions yourself, because this whole field is built around talking. It's built around synthesizing information in the moment, and it's just really important that we practice those skills. So you will see a variety of modalities, I'll say. You will see a few discussion boards typically after you've submitted larger assignments, but you typically won't see them week to week to week to week. You might see some quizzes with longer form questions where I can give feedback and you can respond to me if you like. And I am hoping to come up with some other kind of creative ways for us to interact together, which may include me posing questions or scenarios to you in the lecture and asking you to discuss kind of as a group in the comments below. That is, for the most part, all of the housekeeping stuff I wanted to cover. I will just take a few minutes to give just a really broad overview of what I think of when I think of child welfare and family welfare as well, since this course really speaks to both of those things. I think the first point I'll make is that while it seems counterintuitive, I think child welfare and family welfare are not guaranteed to be the same thing. When we think about child welfare, we think about, is this child safe and well in the environment where they're existing? And when we think of family welfare, we're really thinking about an entire system made up of multiple people. This might be parents, this might be grandparents, it might be non-biological family living in the same home. And unfortunately, those two things might not always be the same. So when we're talking about child welfare, we're really talking about child safety. We're talking about a child's access to basic needs, to higher level needs. And oftentimes what we get into is the idea of child abuse or neglect. Excuse me. When we think about child abuse and neglect, I think what a lot of people think about would likely be the child welfare system as a whole. Here in Washington State, we call that the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF. This is an acronym you'll hear me say a lot, which is the Washington version of Child Protective Services, or CPS, which is probably the acronym that people are familiar with on a broader scale. When we're thinking about child abuse and neglect, we'll get into this in more detail a little bit later in the quarter, but really we're talking about whether basic needs are being met and whether harm is being caused. And then that also leads us into the concept of mandated reporting, which links back to the reason that I gave at the beginning of this lecture, that it's so important that all of us understand this system and understand its goals. Because ultimately, if you're working in human services, you are likely to be a mandated reporter, which again, we will get into later in the quarter. I think I'm going to leave it there for now because there is quite a bit of broad information in this first week, and I want to let you start looking through that and really have room in your brain to digest all of that. In our next lecture, we'll get a little bit more into risk factors, and we'll probably dig into a little bit more specific information. But for now, I want to make sure we get a really good understanding of the larger system, how it works, and what that means for all of us. So enjoy the rest of the module, and I will see you in the next lecture.